Hi, my name is Adriana Caro, and this is my video for Mod 16, the case study of missing booster club funds. Category 1, problem identification and analysis. What do we know? We know that this event happened at a low socioeconomic community in George Washington Middle School. We know that the principal, Mr. Daniel Stevens, is the only principal, the only admin in his building, so he definitely relies on parent volunteers to assist in events such as those athletic events. We also know that there's a booster club, and the booster club president requests the help of 4 parent volunteers for each athletic event. It is my assumption that 2 of them are working the gate and 2 of them are working the concession stand. We also learned that Lucy Bowman, a 7th grader, has received an all-star cheerleader status and therefore has been invited to march in the holiday parade in New York. Now this trip is going to cost her and her parents $798. Now her mother, Mrs. Bowman, is a very active parent volunteer. She had 2 other children that attended George Washington Middle School, and she asked Mr. Stevens to have him fund Lucy's trip to New York. Now, what arose from that conversation was that Mr. Stevens denied that request because he said that those limited resources are to benefit either all or the majority of the student body. It cannot just be to benefit one student. Now, Mrs. Bowman did ask him to reconsider, but his answer did not change. Now, a separate incident here is at the last basketball game of the season, we had Mrs. Bowman working the admissions gate. We also know that at the end of the game, she handed off that money bag to Mr. Stevens. Upon going to his car and counting the money, he sees there's a note that says that 10 tickets were discarded because they were torn. Now, before that, he had a conversation with Mr. Will Dumas. And at the end of that conversation, it was known that he paid with a $50 bill. But upon doing his counting in his car, he realizes that there is no $50 bill. And that amount is the exact amount of those 10 tickets. So he suspects that those $50 are missing. What do we need to know? We really need to know where those damaged tickets are. I believe there was just a note that said they were damaged. We need to know if there is a district policy on those damaged tickets, and if there is, what is it? Are they supposed to be kept? Are they supposed to be, discarded? What's the policy? We also need to know who else was working the gate with Mrs. Bowman. Like I said previously, it is my assumption that 2 parents were working the gate. And if so, who's the other person? Maybe she could have seen, maybe she was a witness. If not, why was there only 1 person? We also need to know whether the money bag was in Mrs. Bowman's possession the entire time before handing it off to Mr. Stevens. Maybe the second person that was working, maybe they had it, or, maybe somebody else had it for some time, and that could be a discrepancy that definitely matters. And then the last thing we need to know is if and what those safeguard policies are that Mr. Stevens has in place for the booster club. The issue here is whether they are missing or not, and whether those 10 tickets actually were damaged. How can we be sure? What's the evidence that we have? Once again, we really don't know if it actually was missing. We're just basing this off of what Mr. Will Dumas had said. Category 2 is a proposed plan of action with appropriate strategies for implementation. Now, my plan of action, the first point would be to investigate the issue, and if needed, at one point, go ahead and involve the district financial officer just to see what the district policy is in this situation. I think when investigating, you would have to proceed with caution and be careful not to accuse Mrs. Bowman. I think next you would have to review those safeguards in place. And then finally, make changes if deemed necessary by district financial officer and communicate those to the staff and parents that are involved. Now, I want to backtrack a little bit. I think reviewing those safeguards in place, at that point, I really do think they already need to change it and to where Mrs. Bowman and Mr. Stevens count the money together, because at that point, that would be the investigation. A simple conversation of, oh, where are these tickets, or what happened, or, oh, I talked to Mr. Dumas and he said he paid with a $50 bill. I don't see that in here. Did you use it to make change, or something like that? At that point, this situation should have not been this big. Category 3, resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students. So the decision here is what is best for the students. First and foremost, all the funds that are collected through PTA need to support student projects that benefit all or most of the student body. That is ultimately what is best for them, not just projects that are going to benefit one student. Also ensuring that policies and procedures set in place safeguard school finances, and if not, definitely make those necessary changes by not having all the stakeholders aware and trained of set policies and procedures. That can cause discrepancies, and then once again we have money that is missing, and that money could have gone to benefit those students. Now, my data that I'm using in order to support my plan, we have Mr. Stevens' response to Mrs. Bowman, him stating that, the reason why he can't give Lucy that money is because it needs to benefit more than just one student, ultimately either all or most of the student body. And the reason why I say that they need to review their policies is, we don't know much on whether they have a policy on damaged tickets. And then reviewing, then making those changes, and also communicating those to those stakeholders is important, because if Mr. Stevens and Mrs. Bowman had, been counting that money together, this really should not be an issue. Category 4, debrief the problem by reflecting on what you were thinking, feeling, and valuing, and by identifying issues that are unresolved or open to further investigation. What was I thinking, feeling, and valuing as I responded to this problem? I think, first and foremost, I was very confused. I had to read that case study several times because I just could not understand whether the money was missing or not. And then I realized that's the whole point of this, is for us to decide what to do. Now, Mrs. Bowman was a dedicated parent, no priors, and that made me feel very, very frustrated, because she has been a dedicated parent. She has had, other children go through this school, and based on that conversation, her asking for Mr. Stevens to fund Lucy's trip, just because of that conversation, Mr. Stevens is quick to jump to that conclusion on whether Mrs. Bowman actually took that money. But then I'm also frustrated, because why would you take $50? $50 is not even going to make a dent in that $798 that she's needing. And I'm really frustrated because I want to know where those tickets are. But I do feel fairly confident in Mr. Stevens, because he does seem to have those safeguards in place. I'm reading that he has a security officer, follow him to his car, and, until he makes that deposit. He's definitely doing some things in order to keep this money safe. But what are some issues that are still unresolved or open to further investigation? Well, we need to know whether that money was actually missing. And once again, where are those tickets? I really want to know. Also, we need to know if parent volunteers are aware of the procedures. I think maybe, if they slipped, if they forgot a step or something, that could definitely fix this issue, potentially. And then also whether it's worth the risk to have them continue working athletic events. If Mr. Stevens is already jumping to conclusions or having these thoughts and doubts, then he needs to evaluate whether it's worth the risk to have them continue working athletic events, or if he can have any staff members that he would deem trustworthy to work these events. Category 5, reflect on Standard 8 by providing evidence that you as a leader promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school or district to promote students' social and academic learning. Now, how did I promote the effective and efficient management of the school or district? I think by investigating if the money was actually missing. It was definitely promoting that effective and efficient management, because at that point, Mr. Stevens could really have just blown it off and just said, maybe I'm just thinking things, because his only suspicion was just based on a very brief conversation he had with Mr. William Dumps. And the fact that he's investigating, I think it's important, whether you have any doubt in your mind, see if it's true. Reviewing and change procedural safeguards to protect school finances. This definitely shows there's efficient management. Seeing if you have provided all of the safeguards in place in order to keep that money safe. That's very, very important. And then finally, I agree with what Mr. Stevens said as far as it's not appropriate to spend those limited resources that are only going to benefit one student. That is promoting effective and efficient management, because at the end of the day, we want to reach all of our students and have them all benefit from those learning experiences, not just one. How did I, as the school leader, promote the social learning and academic learning of every student? I think supporting athletic events and other after-school programs, even during the day programs like the Reading Buddies program, I think, with the help of those parent volunteers, is a way to promote those learning experiences for those students, because these programs are an extension of what learning is accomplished in the classroom, and promoting them, being visible in them definitely shows that you are behind them and supporting, and you're remaining involved. And that is my video.